I see that we have at the moment 40 participants that have just joined us. So seeing that it is now 11:05, I want to officially just welcome you to this morning's webinar, where a very important topic is being discussed. And this topic is obviously touching our personal lives, our business lives, and obviously there's going to be an impact on the South African economy. And what is so amazing is that we've got one of the top, most respected immigration lawyer to address us this morning, but I'll talk to him just now. Just the agenda this morning is I just want to thank my colleagues from the Nordic Chamber and the Swiss Chamber, Jete and Eve, Jete Boertes and Eve Rolf, thank you so much for always collaborating with us and inviting your members. Some of the house rules this morning, which is very important. We are going to keep you muted and your videos off until the end of the session, where we will open it, and then what we do, we will allow each individual to ask questions to Andreas Krenzel directly. But in the meantime, please, if you can all just keep your, and ensure that your microphones and your videos are off, that will be wonderful. And then what we have is, if my president of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, Jose Maria Segurola, is on, I'd like him to officially welcome you this morning. Jose Maria, have you managed to come on? Jaime, is Jose Maria there, please? And if you can just, please.
I haven't seen her. I haven't seen him, so I don't know if he managed to get in.
Okay, so seeing that he's not responding, I want to officially welcome everybody this morning to this very important webinar on behalf of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce President Jose Maria Segurola, who's also the CEO of CaixaBank in South Africa. This topic this morning is something vital for all of us in the different chambers. And what is important now is to get the right people on board to help us to achieve what needs to be achieved. And what is important is that we have one of our members, which is IBN Immigration Solutions, and they've been a member of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce for many years now. Sorry, I keep hearing sound in the background, been doing incredible work. They are well connected to government. They keep up to date with all the legislation, and they are extremely customer centric. So Andreas, thank you very much to you and your team. But a little bit about Andreas is that he's been an immigration lawyer for over 20 years. And he started his career in Germany before arriving in South Africa, where he was really instrumental in establishing IBN and finding the right solutions for people that were working in Africa. And what is important that under his leadership, and I know that you've all got his CV, okay, he has grown IBN Immigration Solutions in an incredible way. Why? Because of the customer delivery and customer-centric philosophy. And not only that, because they have the right knowledge and the right context to help you. Now, without further ado, Andreas, I'd like to hand over to you because they are here to listen to you and not to me. So I'm going to now switch off my video.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for the very, very kind words and a very nice introduction. Hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining. So my name is Andreas Krenzel. I will be guiding through a few things today. I just wanted to spend 1 minute quickly to introduce IBN. So these are the faces of actually IBN who do all the work. We have 5 offices in Africa, 2 in South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, and Kenya. and we only really do immigration, mobility, and visas. But now really moving over to what we're going to discuss today. Okay, so what I was thinking is that we do an easy introduction. We talk slightly and shortly about tourists, and then we really answer the questions about the foreigners either being in South Africa and outside South Africa. So what happened to their visas? What's the current situation? I will then go briefly to the permanent residents and citizens, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time on real case scenarios. So I came up with 6 or 7 case scenarios, which I think will cover quite a broad spectrum. And then the last 2 slides is really just a guess when the borders will open, VFS will open, etc. And then maybe some recommendation on the last slide to what we think government could do to maybe help the foreign investors, the foreigners, regarding the immigration. And then the main part is really the questions. Okay, so that's the end, and then that's, yeah, please prepare some questions, and I'm here to help and answer. And obviously, if I can't answer them, then email us, and you will get the answers afterwards. Okay, all right, so let's jump in. So the first part I really want to discuss is very brief, and that's the tourists. Okay, so probably not a lot of people who are listening today are pure tourists. So what happens to the tourists? And I think it's very important now for the whole seminar here to distinguish between the practical side of our borders are being closed, or most borders are being closed, and really the legal way Home Affairs had to go to basically withdraw certain countries or certain citizens from certain countries to entering in South Africa. Okay, so if we look at the tourists, we need to distinguish between, visa restricted countries and visa exempt countries. So visa restricted countries would be India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, a couple of others. There you need to apply for a visa at the mission, and they will obviously not grant it. Well, actually, if they're a high-risk country, I'll come to that later. But for the visa-exempt countries, and that's probably most of them, of the listeners, which would be Spain, Norway, Germany, etc., you usually fly in and get a 90-day visitor visa on entry. Now, they revoked this exception. So this exemption from a visa necessity, which is the general rule, has been withdrawn. So even if you're now a Spanish or German citizen, then you would have to apply for a visa at a South African mission at the moment, because the exemption has been withdrawn. Okay, so that's how they legally stop tourists of arriving in South Africa. Okay. Now the crucial distinguishing factor for today is really what is a high-risk country. Okay. Now the legislation, and I refer, Home Affairs has published basically a couple of directions, and they also published something in terms of the Disaster Management Act. So these are the sources I used to go back to. And in addition, I can really recommend the website from Home Affairs. They have a special site for COVID. You will find useful information there as well. So what are the high-risk countries? And that's crucial for today, okay? So you will see the certain countries which are high-risk countries at the moment, which is China, France, Germany, Italy, Iran, South Korea, Spain, Switzerland, UK, and the US. And then there's also medium-risk countries, Hong Kong, Portugal, and Singapore. So these are defined. What's unclear, at least to me, and I'm happy to hear any suggestions later on, what happens with Russia, Brazil, and India. They're not mentioned in the legislation. The Home Affairs refers to the WHO website, but even on the World Health Organization's website, it's not really clear what are high-risk countries and what are medium and low risk, and what does it really mean for our legislation, okay? Because it's very important to understand that all what we talk about today is really addressing citizens of high-risk countries, passport holders of high-risk countries, okay? So therefore, that's why I mentioned it on the bottom of the slide. So if you're a national from the Netherlands, Belgium, or Scandinavia, you could, in theory, get into a plane and come into South Africa, and you would be visa exempt, and you should be issued with a visa. Now, practically, obviously, there's no flights and the borders are closed, but I'm talking about the legal side, okay? All right, so that's the tourist visa. Now coming to the really important stuff. And again, we're talking now about foreigners who are currently outside South Africa. Okay, I'm coming to the ones inside South Africa just now. So foreigners who are currently outside South Africa. So all visas for nationals from high-risk countries who were outside the Republic on or after the 15th of March, their visas have been revoked. Okay, so that's very important to understand. So if you had a work visa and you went back to Spain or to Germany, and you then got surprised by the COVID situation, etc. So your visa is revoked. So you cannot just get into a plane and come back. Okay, so the visa is not longer existing, which is obviously quite dramatic. That affects work visa, that affects a spousal visa, and all kinds of temporary residence visa. Okay. Now, it does not affect permanent residence holders, and it does not affect foreigners inside South Africa. Okay, so the foreigners inside South Africa, you have not lost your visa. But for the ones outside, yes, they're revoked. Okay. Now, before, I think it's very important to understand why they did that. Okay, so they had no other legal way of stopping foreigners with a valid temporary residence visa to enter South Africa on a legal ground. They had to revoke the visas because otherwise anybody from a high-risk country could have flown in, but they needed to stop that. So the legal route was to revoke these visas. Okay, so I think practically, and I'll come to this a bit later, practically we need to see what Home Affairs obviously does if the COVID situation hopefully calms down a little bit more in the future. You know, in South Africa, obviously not in the next 2 months, but thereafter, what they want to do, because one of the ways that what they could do is to reinstate the visas, right? I mean, it's not a necessity that we have to reapply for all of them. At the moment, however, you would have to reapply, which means reapply is a new application, which means new police clearances, new medicals, etc., etc. Okay? But since the borders are closed, nobody has really the urgency to reapply now. So you can delay that decision, and we can wait for Home Affairs maybe to reinstate certain visas. Okay. So these are the foreigners outside South Africa. Now we're coming to the foreigners currently inside South Africa. Okay, so that's probably the majority of people listening. So for any foreigner whose visa expired after the 15th of February, so well, it doesn't have a visa now, tourist visa, work visa, etc., you will not be declared illegal, you will not be detained, and you will not be held responsible for an expired visa. Okay, so this is a very important statement. Now you see in red what I wrote there is that this information comes from a Home Affairs website. It's on the COVID website, and you will find it under statements. Now, unfortunately, the Home Affairs website is not law. Okay, so we need to be a bit careful, because in the directions and in the gazetted communication from Home Affairs, this part is not mentioned. It's kind of a logical conclusion, but this is only from the website. So I just wanted to explain that. Okay, then foreigners who want to go home can do so. So again, foreigners whose visa expired. I'm talking only about the one who have expired or will expire obviously soon during the lockdown, okay? They can go home without doing anything until the 31st of July 2020. This deadline might be extended later on. It might be, but at the moment, this is the deadline Home Affairs gave us, okay? So if you have an expired visitor visa and you will get a flight out of South Africa, you can do so. You should not be declared illegal, well, actually undesirable upon exit, okay? Okay, then the other alternative is that the foreigners with expired visas can reapply for their visa. Reapply means not a change of status, okay? So if your visa expired, you can reapply, and now comes the important part without a Form 20. Now, what is a Form 20? It goes now a little bit into detail, but basically to simplify it, if your visa expires and you're still in South Africa and you want to apply for a new visa, you usually have to go through a process which legalizes you first. And after that process, you get a Form 20, which legalizes you. And then you go to VFS and you submit your extension. Now, this Form 20, or this whole process in between, and this process can be very onerous and it's quite lengthy. It involves investigative unit, etc., etc. This process is not needed anymore. Okay, so that's the concession Home Affairs gave us for the crisis. Okay, so yes, now let's assume VFS opens in 2 weeks. Your visa has expired. You want to extend it, go to VFS, you can extend it. You do not need the Form 20. So that's very important to know. All right, yeah, so the last case here really, or last case, but one, sorry. There sometimes might be tourists, for instance, who came in September, October. They extended their stay by 90 days. So they were here 6 months. They extended their visitor visa once already. So by law, they shouldn't be able to extend the visitor visa another time, because you can only extend your visitor visa once. Now, also here, Home Affairs has given a concession and say, listen, if your visa expired during the lockdown, then obviously you can apply for a second time. So for your third visitor visa, okay? Again, until the 31st of July. All right, now that's an important one now here, the last one. So if you were a holder of a work visa and you applied for an extension, before the lockdown, but you have not been able to collect the outcome because obviously VFS was closed, then you are allowed to continue to work as well as to continue to study or conduct your business. Okay, so again, this is very important. You had a work permit in my example, it expires in April. You applied in March for an extension. That extension outcome is not ready for collection because VFS is closed. Your initial work permit has expired, so you are allowed to continue working, which is contrary to the normal law. Okay. All right, so that's really for foreigners currently inside South Africa. Yeah. Okay, briefly, citizens and permanent residence holders, the golden rule is they must be permitted to come back into South Africa. You hear it in the press all the time, the repatriation. Basically, South Africa cannot prohibit permanent residence holders or citizens from returning. If they come from high-risk countries or not, it doesn't matter. Okay, very important practically. You need to, if you're outside South Africa in one of the high-risk countries and you want to go back, you need to give notice 72 hours to the South African mission, and then you could, in theory, come back. Okay, so that's really all there is to say to permanent residents. Okay, case scenarios. All right, so the first one is a very basic, simple one. So the first one is really, and I must just look on my notes because the camera picture of my own camera here is actually obstructing me reading the case scenarios. Okay, so the first case is a very clear one. You're here on a work permit, an ICT work permit with critical skills. It was issued in 2018, it's expiring in 2022, and you are in South Africa since the 15th of March. Can you currently work? And the answer is very clearly yes, because you are actually not affected from COVID whatsoever. You don't fall into all the special rules. Okay, it's a straightforward scenario. All right, then the second case is a bit different. Okay, so X is a Spanish citizen on a work visa. It was issued in 2018 and it's expiring in 2022. And X left with his family from South Africa for a holiday in Spain and got stuck there. And now the question comes from the employer, can he remotely work from outside South Africa for the company in South Africa? Now, in order to do that, he would need a valid work visa. Now, his valid work visa, or her valid work visa, has been revoked because Spain belongs to a high-risk country, and the person left before the deadline of the 15th of March was outside the 15th of March, and therefore the work visa has been revoked. Okay. Now you see in my answer, it's a bit longer. I just wanted to mention that, not that I get now complaints that I'm simplifying things, but the regulations really speak of somebody, visa gets revoked if you're an ordinary resident in a high-risk country. Now, one could obviously argue, that the Spanish person in my example here was actually ordinary resident in South Africa since 2018, just went for holiday and wants to go back. But I fear this visa would be revoked and they would also not be allowed to travel. So I think that the general principle stands here. Okay. And please, later, if you have questions to that, as I said, we come to the questions later. Okay. Third case scenario. A Belgian national has applied for the first critical skills visa, and that was issued on the 10th of March, but the person was planning to fly on the 1st of April. So that's when the lockdown obviously started. It started actually a little bit before. Okay. So is the critical skills work visa, which was issued in Brussels, at the South African mission in Brussels, is it still valid? And the answer would be yes, because Belgium is not considered a high-risk country. And therefore, yes, the person can or Y can fly into South Africa once we have flights and once our borders are open, because the visa has not been revoked. Okay. Last case scenario for this slide. C, a Norwegian national wishes to fly South Africa with BA via London to visit his in-laws. Can he do this in principle? Okay. And the answer would be, in principle, yes, but obviously he flies over London. London is a high-risk country, and therefore he cannot do it. Okay, he will be denied entry. So it's important to know that even transfer, or transit, I guess one calls it, through a high-risk country is considered to come from a high-risk country. Yeah, you don't have to be national. If you travel through or transit through, the rules which we're discussing are applicable. Okay. All right, then another 3, I think, yes. Okay, now we're coming to people in South Africa, right? So these were, the first slide was really for foreigners outside South Africa, and now we're coming to foreigners inside South Africa. So these on a visitor visa and expiring on the 15th of June, and would apply, like to know if she could apply for a retired visa. Okay, so currently, of course, the visa is valid. First question is probably, when is VFS opening? Now, we don't know that, but let's assume they open on the 10th of June. Could she change from a visitor visa to a retired visa? Now, this question actually has nothing to do with COVID. The question just gets answered pretty much like normal immigration law. And a change from a tourist visa is not allowed in South Africa. There are exceptions, but this is not one of the exceptions. So she could not apply for a retired visa, okay? Because the rule obviously say that you can extend your current visa. So she could apply for an extension of the visitor visa, but she cannot change to a retired visa. Okay. Yeah, then the next case, somebody's on an ICT, expiring on the 1st of June, and currently in South Africa and would like to extend the intercompany transfer. Okay, is that possible? Now, with this kind of data which I gave here, there would probably be a couple of follow-up questions. And the first follow-up question really is, how long was the first intercompany transfer visa issued? Okay, so if the first intercompany transfer visa was issued for 2 years, and then or for 3 years, then A could apply for another 2 years or 1 year respectively. Yeah? If VFS obviously is closed still on the 1st of June and the ICT expires, the COVID rules come in and say, well, you don't have to have the Form 20. You can go to VFS and apply for an extension of your current visa, the ICT, at VFS once they're open without being penalized. Okay. Now, if that person obviously had a 4-year ICT visa, then it becomes slightly more complicated. So the rule is, if you had a 4-year ICT visa, you cannot extend it. You can maybe, under very, very strict circumstances, apply for a new intercompany transfer, but you would have to do this outside South Africa. However, due to the COVID rules, you probably can extend the intercompany transfer visa until the 31st of July, which is the current deadline. Okay. And the last case, really, okay, so Kay work visa is expiring on the 30th of June, and her employment with company Z will also end then. Okay, so on the 30th of June, this employment will end with the company Z. She would like to leave South Africa then on the 20th of July. Is this possible, and which steps should be taken? And would something change if she would like to leave on the 10th of August? So here the question is really, what are the obligations for the employer when the employment ends? And what are the obligations on the employee when the employment ends? Okay, so let's start with the employer. As you all know, the employer has to notify Home Affairs that the employment relationship has ended. It's a notification to Home Affairs. You know that from the undertakings you usually sign. So one of the undertakings is that you notify Home Affairs. So that's the obligation of the of the employer. Then in practice, usually Home Affairs grants the employee a 30-day grace period to exit the country, because usually you have to, sell the house or move and finish things, etc. So although the work permit and the employment ends here in this example on 30th of June, you get a 30-day grace period taking you to the end of July. So the answer really is until the end of July, the person can probably just exit. Again, not penalized, just exit if there would be flights and you're out. The alternative, the 10th of August, obviously changes things because it's behind the July deadline. And here we would have to look at, maybe changing to a tourist visa first, or just really recommending you leave before the 31st of July, which in practice would probably be much, much easier. All right. That's it to the case scenarios. Now we're coming really to the last two slides, and they're much quicker than the case scenarios, and then we open everything up for the questions. Okay, so when will VFS and the missions open, and when can you travel again? Well, you see it in red that we don't know. And if anybody knows, please share it with us afterwards. We would be quite interested in it. However, obviously, we have reached out to various missions. You get completely contradictory answers. I mean, Paris said probably not this year at all anymore, which I don't think we have to believe. That would be quite dramatic. The VFS office in the UK said it will be middle of June, but also there is nothing specific. So in the end, we need to probably wait and see. What I can share is that the Home Affairs has issued a Circular 3 where they instruct and very clearly stipulate the services which are now starting to be prepared. And obviously, I think the level 3 might really change significantly that certain offices will open more. I mean, we all know that Home Affairs has already continued to provide services. I mean, they were not closed or anything, but their services was very limited. And I think on level 3, they might offer more services. And I also think that the permitting might start in the background, taking into account all the protective measures they're supposed to do. Now, what I can share is that SAQA, which is obviously an important part in a lot of work permit applications, has started operating this week. And we also can confirm that certain professional bodies are working. They have actually worked during the whole time, but remotely, and they struggle to issue certain certificates. So practically, you can't get the results of the whole process, but you can apply and they actually look at the stuff, etc. But I really hope that when we move to level 3, that this will become a bit faster and a bit more automated like it used to be in the past. At the moment, it's quite onerous to constantly follow up and push. Yeah, so, in the end, we're probably looking at beginning of June that at least in South Africa, things are starting to slowly normalize when it comes to immigration. Now, what worries me very much is that, and that's right on the bottom of the slide, that when it comes to international flights, and most of the audience obviously is quite interested in that, that an internal presentation of the Minister of Tourism is indicating that they might only have international flights in February 2021. Now, obviously, that's not the law, that's not a decision, but it is a true internal presentation. And obviously, I wonder, the Minister of Tourism maybe should have incentive to open up the flights earlier than later. So if the Minister of Tourism says February 21, then that's quite worrying, okay? So the last slide really, so what could Home Affairs do to ease a little bit the pain and get the ball rolling? I think the fundamental question really is what they do with the high-risk countries' nationals and reinstate the visas, because if they don't reinstate them, everybody has to reapply, which causes an incredible amount of additional work, costs, pain, and also to a very heavy workload at the missions. And the missions don't have additional staff. They're already understaffed. So, that would not be a good decision, okay? The other suggestions, which we think they should really look into, is to really start opening up the missions. I mean, applications can be submitted by courier. The biometrics could be done when they enter South Africa, because they do this in other cases. So you don't have, appointments. You just send it in. They process everything. and in particular, considering that a lot of missions have processing times from 6 to 8 weeks, yes, from the countries which are listening today, usually the processing times are a bit better and shorter, but there are a lot of South African missions where you have processing times of 6 to 8 weeks. Now, if they only start processing this once the borders are opening, or once there is international travel, we're losing this 6 to 8 weeks. So I think Home Affairs needs to start thinking a little bit when to accept applications. And then the last comment on this point, and that's a very important comment, is if you apply for a work visa now at a South African mission and you get it issued, strictly speaking, you can start working for the South African company. Yes, remotely, you don't have to be in South Africa, but at least the companies could use the expertise from the foreigners, which they want to have anyway, and they could start working. So the second point is very important, really, to maybe normalize and ease the pain a little bit. So I think it would be very important that the missions are looking into it to open their work sooner than later. Yeah, and then I think the last one is to give very clear instructions to the professionals' bodies. Are they now allowed to work on level 3 or level 2 or level 4? Are they a professional firm or not? Yeah, so and then the last comment really is that I think the opening of the borders at the moment is not on high on the agenda. Obviously, look, we need to understand if our numbers are really dramatically increasing now, and they will increase. Obviously, you cannot also say, well, we're going to open the borders in a month. Just because Europe is starting to open the borders doesn't mean we have to. But I do think that government internally at the moment looks very much into South Africa internally, and not enough maybe at the international movement of people. And I don't think it's high enough on their priority. And I think it's a good idea to maybe push this a little bit onto the agenda, so that at least by August, maybe September, the borders can be open, and certainly not in February or maybe even December, because I mean, for tourism it's a nightmare, but for businesses it's a complete nightmare. And I mean, the government could introduce, for instance, a COVID pass, like the yellow fever pass. For people who have come from yellow fever countries, you need a pass to show. I mean, there are, I think these days there are even tests which show COVID within hours these days. So I think that would be an idea to ease a little bit the international travel. Also, I think foreign workers who are coming in don't mind to self-isolate, at least in South Africa. At least they're with family or they're in their new house, and they can, easier maybe work with the local employer. So the self-isolation might also be an option. So I think there are practical solutions to at least opening up the international flights a little bit earlier. In particular also from low risk countries, sorry. Yeah, so that's just what I wanted to mention. All right, so this is really the end of my presentation. I hope it was not too long. Yeah, and over to questions, please. So yeah, whatever questions we can't answer, please email us, okay? Either Hans Kroll, who's based in Johannesburg, or myself. There's the email. And Manuela, just let me know if I must maybe stop now the presentation and my screen sharing so we can go to the normal camera mode, or not.
No, Hans, thank you very much for that. I think this was very valuable, the information that you've given to us. I'd like you to keep this last slide on. And what I do want to acknowledge is that we are very, very honored to have one of the directors of the Department of Trade and Industry, Ms. Rashmi Raghavan, with us today. And I'm sure she sort of listened to a lot of these things that you have been talking about, and will also listen to the questions that our attendees and participants are going to now be asking. So the first question I see has just come through on the chat, which is there a current list of contact information for South African diplomatic missions overseas? I have not been able to find a current email and phone number for the High Commission in Kuala Lumpur.
I would have to look on our internal drive. So if you give me the email, I can look. I'm sure we have it, but I mean, usually all the missions are on the website from Home Affairs, or actually more importantly from DIRCO. So DIRCO, the Department of International Relations. But I would have to look internally. I don't know that information out of my head.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, everything is now open. Jaime, if you can allow Anna Moyan to maybe ask a question, but in the meantime, just invite her. It says, sorry, I may have missed it. What happens if study visas expires while we're in lockdown?
Okay, so very good question. So if the study visa expires during lockdown, then strictly speaking, you're not allowed to continue studying. Practically, obviously, the university might be closed anyway. You can then extend the study visa as soon as VFS opens. There will be no penalty, so you will be fine. You can just extend it. And in case you have applied for an extension of the study visa before the lockdown, that extension is pending, you can continue studying.
Sorry, I'm hearing some background.
I was trying to unmute some people with the questions, for example, Anna now, but I'm struggling to unmute them. So if we can allow them to talk, and in that case, they can unmute themselves. So
Yes,
they can talk, and because it's not allowing me to do it. So
okay. So ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to mute you all from our side. If you can just continue muting yourself until you have a question to ask, then you can start interacting directly with Andreas himself. I see that in the meantime, there's another question here for you, Andreas, which is, morning, I came to South Africa under an ICT4, am now in my second 11.1, and that's as far as it went. So I don't know what that means. Maybe Jeremy Sefik, if you could sorry, here we go. More information. Came to South Africa under an ICT4 and am now in my second 11.1, expiring end of June. If I change companies in South Africa starting July or August, how can that be managed through a critical skills, and do I have to leave the country?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, because I heard 11.1, which is a normal tourist visa, that's at least what I heard, then this person would be on a normal tourist visa expiring, I believe he said or she said, end of June. If the rule is very clear, you cannot change your status from a visitor visa. You can extend the visitor visa. That person might even be able to extend it a second time, so a third time total. But she cannot or he cannot change the status. So the answer is you need to apply for the critical skills outside South Africa.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. In the meantime, we've got another question now from Deborah, and it's, we have an employee, sorry.
No, that was me. I stopped the screen sharing. So.
Oh, okay. So all of a sudden I lost my chats and I was asking, sorry, I've lost all the questions at the moment.
The chat at the bottom.
Yes. So don't you just want to keep that your contact details on the screen as we had before? But now here we go. Now here's some more questions. We have an employee in Bahrain and we need to get him back to South Africa. South Africa employee, who can I direct this request to?
Say that again, please.
Okay. Now, Deborah has an employee in Bahrain and we need to get him back to South Africa. And he is a South African employee and she wants to know who she can get assistance from. Who can she direct this question? I think, Deborah, a good idea would be maybe to send Andreas an email after this and have a direct dialogue, because I think this might just be a little bit more complicated.
Yeah,
so,
because it varies from lots of information, which I don't think we want to discuss in public now.
Okay. And then another question. I have a 3 months work visa that was renewed for 3 months. This extension will expire this month. Could I ask for another 3 months extension after the 31st of July?
No. So after the 31st of July, no. At current legislation, no, because at the moment, the COVID concessions, if you want to call them, they're all expiring on the 31st of July. Now, my personal estimate is that Home Affairs will extend these concessions because, I mean, we're only going to now have less international flights because our numbers are going up unless they're opening the borders. So my personal opinion is that they'll probably extend the concession time by another month or so. But at the moment, when we talk now, no, this is not possible because it's after the deadline of the 31st of July.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now I have Sophie Rosette here who says, hello, we have many French employees waiting to go to South Africa since May 2020. The immigration process is obviously pending. Do you think there is a chance for them to enter South Africa, or should we understand that this will not be possible for this year?
Well, okay. So at the moment, the South African mission in Paris is not working. They're not processing any applications. So if they have submitted the applications for work visas, they will just be lying there and do nothing about it, okay? If they were issued with work visas already, then these visas have most likely been revoked. But I mean, the question there, I think, is it doesn't indicate that they were issued with work visas already. And now to the timeline, I mean, will this be possible this year? So that obviously is now aiming at exactly my last 2 points. I think, you know, at the moment, yes, we hear from the Minister of Tourism, the international flights only early next year, but let's be realistic. I think if we really have the peak in July, and the whole world is opening up, America is opening up to Europe, Europe is opening up among Europeans, I cannot really see that South Africa will close the borders for another 8 months. And plus, if the numbers are going down from France, there's no objective reason anymore to really do that. So my estimate would be no, not. I think it will be possible before the end of the year, but will it be possible next 2 months? Most likely not.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. Now we have a question from Moshi Ratsebe, who says, with regards to foreign national students studying in South Africa who had to leave South Africa just before the lockdown, what are the indications that these kids will be allowed into South Africa, especially if South Africa schools open in June?
Yeah, so this is a very good question because it also, now we need to distinguish where are these children coming from, okay? So are they coming from high-risk countries or are they coming from neighboring countries, which are low risk at the moment? I mean, Namibia didn't have a case in 2 weeks. And as a matter of fact, I mean, if you look at OR Tambo and the International Cape Town Airport, there's daily flights into Windhoek. So fact is that it depends where they're coming from. Okay, so if they're not from high-risk countries, and my assumption is that most of them will not come from high-risk countries because very few Germans really study them here in the schools, then that should be fine because their visas have not been revoked. Their study visas are valid. Therefore, once they practically allow people coming in, maybe on level 2 or so, then they are able to come in and the study visas are valid. If they're from high-risk countries, obviously, the situation is different.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. We have a question here from Leola Britton. Can we get a copy of this presentation post the Zoom meeting? Absolutely. We will be sharing the presentation and a copy of the recording of this meeting to all of you. Then I have another question for you from Jorge Rodriguez. He says, I work as a managing director of a South African branch in a Spanish group with an RC visa. I left South Africa on the 25th of March, just before the lockdown. So from your presentation, I realized that the South African government may revoke my visa. So theoretically, I cannot work for the South African company from Spain. Is that correct? And why are they from the 15th of March 2020 as the deadline? Should I pay taxes in South Africa if they have revoked my visa?
And the tax question you need to ask, please, the tax practitioner, not me. I do not give any tax advice. So, so I refrain from that. So a very good question. So this person obviously left South Africa on the 25th of March. Okay, so that's the date he said, and he's currently outside South Africa. Now, the rule says that he is currently outside South Africa. So that's number one. He's a foreign national from a high-risk country. So tick, tick. And then he's outside South Africa on or after the 15th of March. On or after. So in my opinion, yes, your visa has been revoked. You do not have a valid work visa. Therefore, even remotely, you're not allowed to work for your company. That is the unfortunate situation. And I'm not sure if Home Affairs has really seen this. I'm not even sure if they really intended this, to be honest, because what they really needed, they needed a legal way to stop you, now the person who asked the question, of coming back. Because that's what they didn't want. They didn't want Spanish people coming, in March into South Africa who had a visa. That they didn't want that. But this situation is obviously different. This person left South Africa on the 25th of March, sits now in the home country and awaits the end of COVID, right? And I mean, we have lots of clients like this who went back to their home countries and are sitting there now. So this question is a fundamental, important question. Now, my interpretation at the moment is that the work visas are revoked. You're not allowed to work, finished and clear. However, I have my doubts if Home Affairs really intended this. I just think they didn't have any legal other way to achieve the other purpose, which is the re-entry, right? So this is definitely something I think one can take up with Home Affairs and maybe also discuss, because I'm not sure if they're really aware of that consequence.
Okay, thank you for that, Andreas. And in the meantime, Rashmi, I see that you're still online. If you can maybe take this kind of question and put it forward from the DTI perspective to the Department of Home Affairs, we would be very, very grateful for your assistance. And then in the meantime, another question from G. Piraud. It says, hello, the embassy in Paris has invited us to come and fetch our applications and passport. Does that mean we will have to submit a full application from scratch when this becomes possible again?
So I've heard that as well. So clients of ours have confirmed this, that the Paris mission has said that. So yes, I fear they're basically saying, look, all the pending applications, we move them out, we will not approve them, and you have to reapply. So unfortunately, at the moment, my answer would be yes, it looks like you have to completely resubmit a complete new application. However, remember, if you're getting your whole application back, what you really need to look out for is how long are the medical certificates valid? How long are the police clearances valid? They're always valid for 6 months, okay, after issuings. So maybe, with a lot of luck, these are valid until August, and you can just resubmit the whole application without much work. Now, I know you still have to go there, and it's an effort, I get all that, but that might be a possibility. But that's why I'm saying, that's exactly why I'm suggesting to Home Affairs that they need to really carefully consider this revocation and reinstatement thing. Or at least say, I don't know, reinstate them, but with a condition or something like that, that they can't enter South Africa. So I think they didn't think of all the consequences really because of the pressure of time. I mean, one needs to also be realistic that everything was time pressurized, and you can come up not with all, possibilities in such a short period of time.
Okay, thank you for that, Andreas. One last question, it appears. I have a French national currently employed in Shanghai who we would like to employ in South Africa via an ICT visa. We have not yet applied for the ICT. As of when do you think we will be able to start the application process for this ICT?
So there I have a clear answer. The good news is now. So and I will give reasons obviously for my short answer. So I would start the application process now. Usually it takes 4 to 5 weeks for an ICT to be processed. You need obviously letters from all kinds of people and police clearances, etc. So you get everything prepared. And my sincere, my gut feeling and based on some information is that in a month's time, when this ICT would be in the best case scenario ready for submission, most missions will probably hopefully accept the applications. But then you submit the application, then you wait, obviously, until the visa comes out. And also, yeah, the only problem here is obviously this person is in China, and China is still considered a high-risk country. So obviously at the moment, they would really have to open the mission, and they would have to change the legislation to allow applications from certain high-risk countries again. But I think that's really a question of what is a high-risk country, and are they changing the list? Because, I mean, China compared to now Brazil, I think we all agree that China is probably a low-risk country compared to Brazil, while on the Home Affairs list, it's still the other way around. But the answer to that question now, because usually it takes 4 to 5 weeks for preparation time, and in 4 to 5 weeks, we see clearer, and then one can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for this, Andreas. I think this has really empowered all the attendees with some information. I know that there's a lot of other questions that are going to be coming up. I invite you to connect with Andreas directly as soon as possible. What is important is we will be running another session on visas on the 3rd of June, where we are expecting more announcement will have happened by then. So we once again invite you you will receive this, the new invitation going forward. And please feel free to get in touch with Andreas. We will send this presentation, we will send the recording. And Andreas and your team, thank you so much for this morning. To my colleagues, Jette Boertes and Eve Rolf and all their members, thank you very much. A great honor having you on this. And enjoy your day and keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.